There is a type of diplomatic communication called the NODIS cable. No one voted for it. It appears in no law you have ever read, and it has existed since 1961, operating inside the State Department with the power to authorize foreign policy decisions that leave no public record. You are affected by what those cables say. You will never see them. Every day, the State Department sends thousands of cables, encrypted messages between embassies, consulates, and Washington. Most eventually become part of the historical record. Classified cables get declassified, reviewed, sometimes released through Freedom of Information requests. That is how historians reconstruct what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The cable system is the nervous system of American foreign policy, and it has a designation, a single word stamped at the top of a message, that removes it from that system entirely. That word is NODIS, no distribution. The moment it appears on a cable, the record disappears. Congress did not create NODIS. No statute established it. No Senate vote authorized it. It exists because the State Department, under its own administrative authority, built a classification tier inside its own communications infrastructure. The legal foundation is the Foreign Affairs Manual, a document the State Department writes, updates, and controls without congressional approval. Section 5 FAM governs cable handling. NODIS sits at the top of that system. A cable marked NODIS is restricted to its action addressees. Only the specific people named on the message can see it, not the broader bureau, not congressional oversight committees unless the executive branch allows it. The designation was formalized in the early 1960s and has never been subject to a public vote. It was constructed by the institution it protects. Here is who decides what gets marked NODIS. The sending officer. The diplomat, the ambassador, the National Security Council staffer who drafts the cable determines its own distribution tier. There is no independent review, no judicial check at the moment of sending. The State Department has internal guidelines, but the decision to remove a cable from the accessible record is made by the same people whose communications the cable contains. A Secretary of State can send a NODIS cable directing a specific policy action, and the only institutional check is whether someone inside that same executive branch later decides to declassify it. No one outside the executive can compel that review in real time. Remember, no one voted for this, and what travels inside NODIS cables is not bureaucratic routine. In 1971, Henry Kissinger conducted the entire secret diplomatic opening to China through NODIS backchannel cables. The American public did not know those negotiations were happening. Congress did not know. The cables between Kissinger and Zhou Enlai, messages that repositioned the United States' entire strategic posture in Asia, that ended a 23-year diplomatic freeze with a nuclear power, existed in a layer of the State Department's cable system that generated no public record while those decisions were being made. By the time Nixon shook hands with Zhou Enlai on live television, the policy had already been fully negotiated in cables no one outside a handful of officials had ever read. That is not ancient history. It is the operating template. Every major diplomatic commitment made in private, every back-channel negotiation, every agreement that precedes a public announcement, those communications travel on channels carrying the NODIS designation or its functional equivalent. And when those decisions affect trade terms, military posture, the recognition of governments, the pressure applied to foreign courts, they affect you. The record of how they were made does not exist in any form you can access. And here is the part that should actually worry you: it's completely legal. NODIS is not a loophole. It is not a workaround. It is the intended architecture. The State Department's authority to manage its own communications classification flows from executive power over foreign affairs, an authority tracing directly to Article II of the Constitution and interpreted by the Supreme Court for over a century as largely unreviewable by Congress. Courts have held that the executive branch controls diplomatic communications. FOIA exemptions for classified and national security material codify this in statute. The mechanism is not hidden inside a forgotten regulation. It is protected at the constitutional level. You cannot pass a law that eliminates it because the authority that created it predates the administrative state itself. Think about what that means for every institution that claims accountability, every treaty that begins in a back-channel cable, every sanctions decision communicated privately before announcement, every commitment made to a foreign government in a message that will never enter the public record unless the executive decides otherwise. The State Department is not unique. The pattern: build a classification tier inside your own administrative system, protect it with executive authority, remove the record at the moment of creation, is the structural template every major executive agency has adapted in its own domain. The Defense Department has its version. The intelligence community has several. NODIS is not an anomaly. It is the proof of concept. It is the model, and it has been working without interruption since before most people watching this were born. So here is the question no one can answer from outside the system. What is in the NODIS cables being sent right now? What decisions, what commitments, what agreements are being closed in messages that carry the full force of American foreign policy and that you will never be permitted to read?